if the things that you shot for when you were a boomer coming of age further away from you than they were, then maybe you wouldn't have the same urge to try and attain these things, you know, like the steady job, the house. If you don't have these, if you put them markers too far away, which I think, like I say, they are further away, maybe you don't have the incentive to save that money.
Boom for life.
Boom, 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 everybody say whale.
Well,
Boom, 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 everybody say whale.
well.
So today we'll be talking about the baby boomers. You wouldn't believe it, but some people have got a problem with the baby boomers.
What?
I know.
Who?
What's their problem, Sal?
I wonder myself.
Well, firstly, who are these baby boomers that we speak of? Sorry.
Who are they? Exactly. Yeah. So if I understand correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, it's people who were born between in the 50s and 60s, right?
I'm live from Wikipedia. It says from 46 to 64, and they're called the boomers because their parents after the war wanted a lot of babies, and so there was a significant rise in births, and that's why they're called the baby boomers.
But there are different age groups in different countries too, right? Because not in every country it's so apparently in Germany, for example, or also after the Second World War, the time around which people are defined baby boomers changes depending on when there was this kind of peak in fertility. So obviously, or I guess in countries that lost in the war, it came a bit later than in other countries. But
so they were expecting to do them Germans, didn't they? You know, before they went on with.
They weren't celebrating after the war, frolicking.
Yeah, strange thing. But so the thing is, people criticize the baby boomers. So one question is then, who is actually criticizing them? So apparently the millennials, right?
Yeah.
Is a big chunk of people who are opposed, as it seems, criticizing them, but also Generation Z. Is that the one?
Is this younger than millennials? Is generation? Yeah, because I think millennials are Generation X, are they?
I'm not really up to date on all the generations, to be honest.
I can't remember, but I think the term boomers and millennials is what I think maybe the people who study it like to call it, from Generation X to Z or whatever. But the media's coined it boomer and millennial, and
Right. When would a millennial be born?
We're millennials. Let me have a look, man.
As far as I know, I'm at the end of the spectrum of millennials. So 82 is, I think, the last year in which millennials are considered millennials, or the oldest. So everything that comes after that until, I don't know. But so when we say millennials are criticizing baby boomers, it would be interesting first to understand or take it with a grain of salt, because when we see these things online, we don't know if it's really a lot of millennials or if it's just the loud minority in the YouTube comments and on Twitter and all these platforms that just, had too much time on their hands. So I'm not sure if you saw any real statistics about this, but that's, maybe going into the conversation, we should bear that in mind.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Sal. Like that seems to be the problem at the moment with a lot of these.
Yeah.
As you've got a loud minority on the internet. I'd say personally though, I do feel my friends, I feel a little bit of that resentment towards them. That's maybe why I thought it was a good thing to talk about, because in my personal circle of friends, they seem to think that they just seem to think that the boomers had it easier than we do.
Okay, well, that's a good point. But then again, one thing one caveat, as we say, I would like to point out, because the baby boomers, within the time frame, we both have hippies, right? Like the flower power movement, would they be considered also baby boomers?
Yeah, I guess.
And then on the other hand, we also have hardcore Republican not right wing, but party wise on the right, oil magnates and people working there. So you have what I want to say is you have a very broad spectrum socially and financially. So criticizing them and throwing them all in one pot is not a thing I find very interesting about this whole topic, because there's, as you said before we started taping, there's the financial part where people criticize them for financial reasons, that they kind of accumulated all the wealth. But then there's also the social parts, that they're lazy, narrow-minded, that they didn't care about the environment and all these other things we can get into in a second. But between a hippie and these kind of hardcore Wall Street guys, there are two worlds. So we have to be very wary of what we criticize exactly, and if we can really measure up and throw all the baby boomers into one pot. Because I find it very contradictive, to be honest, the whole topic.
You think it's kind of just grouping things together in too much of a simplistic way to gain any value from.
So
Absolutely.
when there are criticisms, are the criticism towards the whole generation? Because it does seem ridiculous. Anybody that's born within this 20-year period deserves some flack. Or is there a specific group of that age group?
That's a good question. Online, it seems they all throw everything together, as far as I can tell. Because if you say people are narrow-minded, racist, and only think about money, for example, then you exclude all the hippies, because what they did back then with all the orgies, that it didn't seem very narrow-minded to me, to be honest. It looked very experimental.
You looked into that, sir?
I just read about it. And if you talk about being lazy and complacent and only living day to day, it doesn't sound like some hardcore business guy trying to make a career and working hard. And, so which one is it? So that's one criticism I would have of people criticizing the baby boomers in a certain way. And also the other thing, the third element, is the ageism element, which is, are some people just criticizing them because they're older? So of course they are richer because they've been working for a longer time. Now, you sent the link to us that was very interesting, and it showed comparatively if you would calculate it down to the same age groups, I believe that baby boomers would have made more money, right?
Yeah, that was that generation. I think this is talking about the United States, with that generation.
US, yeah.
When they were our age, accounted for 27% of the wealth in the world or in the country, whereas now it's only 3%. But yeah, the Economics Explained video did go on to break that down, and there was credit to it, but there was reasons for it that made it less harsh as what those figures suggest.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and therefore, so we said, who's criticizing? Also, how old are these people who are criticizing them? That's another thing I want to know, because it sounds very much like a classic puberty rebellion against their parents. And in a way, it's just playing out itself now in public. We all had our rebellion phase at home. I can't imagine like some 40-year-old millennial hacking away on a keyboard and, well, who knows, maybe everything's possible these days. But it sounds very much just like a generational rebellion, and always these kind of things online. I don't see anything useful coming out for either side. So if you just criticize the elderly or the baby boomers, I mean, in the end, they're elderly. It's the same thing. What are you hoping to achieve? Like, what are you improving by criticizing them? You might be right in certain. Look, I'm not saying that there are not some criticisms that are completely that should be analyzed. But by insulting the whole generation, I'm not seeing how that furthers the conversation, how that moves the puck into any useful part on the playfield.
I completely agree, Sal. That's sort of where I was. That's the summary I came up with. We're watching all this, and I just think it's something that bothers people about. I mean, particularly in England, in my kind of social circle, I guess, it all seems to be about, because there's this real big focus on buying a house in England, buying a house, which seems to have got a lot more difficult for people who are our age than it was for their parents. And I think I think that is accurate when you look at the numbers, compared to what you borrow, like compared to your annual salary. Back 30 years ago, it used to be a lot easier. You used to have to borrow 3 times your annual salary with a smaller deposit, and now it's 5 times with a bigger deposit. So I think those numbers, interest rates are different, but I think it is harder. But I think people just need to get over this kind of, you don't have to live the same life your parents lived, and if you can't buy, if you can't buy a place, and you can't. Also, I think the university thing plays into this as well, because people thought that they had a clear path by going to university and getting a job. They get a job in an industry that paid them, and they could kind of go the rest of their life like that. And I think this is a thing that bothers them. That the world's moving a lot faster now. Some of these industries just come and go, and then maybe life isn't turned out how they wanted it to be, because things are just not as simple as they were. But like you say, that's where I'd have summarised it also. It's what your parents are going to do about it. I think the other thing that maybe doesn't happen is a lot of the parents get an attitude of, well, we had it. Why don't you just do this, just do that? And they don't really understand the troubles that the younger people are going through, because it isn't the same as when they were younger. But at the end of the day, how are they ever going to see anything coming? Like you say, there's no point resenting them about it, is there? It's all things that you have to deal with, and that's just life, isn't it? Things aren't the same as they were. So what are you going to, like Russell Brand would ask, what are we going to do about it? Not too helpful complaining, definitely.
Are the complainers coming up with any possible solutions, like reparations?
Reparations.
Which is one of my favourite.
The reparations are going to happen when that generation is going to die, because a lot of people are going to inherit money if they maybe not those that complain very vocally and organize protest in front of the parents' house. But I see there's these
statue on the lawn.
Exactly. Pull down the dwarf statue or something. The thing is, you might be right as well. It can be true that house prices, and it is true that it's more difficult to find a job that allows you to buy a house for different reasons. It might be more difficult to get a loan for your house. All these things that you mentioned before might be true. I just wonder, how is it your parents' fault?
Right.
You know what I'm trying to say. So
I completely agree, Sal. Yeah.
Because you're looking for a scapegoat if that's how your mind works, aren't you?
That's how I feel it is. Now, there are many political decisions that have led to this way, and you might be complaining that they voted a certain way, and therefore we got certain politicians. But then there's also at least as many people who voted the other way, So I just find this whole way of going about this very immature. And it's a bit sad that, then again, I just wonder how many millennials really care about this at all, or really see it through the same lens. Because I have a feeling it's just, a few thousand people online trolling all day long. And so we got into this whole, so we got the perception that there's a generational war going on. We always had generational problems, though. There's always been a misunderstanding between the generation and the generation that came before. And always the generation that came before always romanticized things how they were before, and things were better, and always thought the younger generation were lazy, or they were useless, or they were too weak, or they were too, all these things. Now, actually, we have the first generation, what did you say before? Z? What is it again? So many.
The youngest generation.
The younger generation now. There's for the first time where actually we can measure that they really are becoming more fragile, but that's for different reasons. That's we talked about social media and all these things.
Social media, the coddling of the American mind.
Exactly.
That's a story for another.
Jonathan Haidt. But yeah, this is more of a generational thing that has always been there. So what I'm trying to find is what is specific to the baby boomers that this discussion is being had. So what did they do that makes them different from all the generations that came before, criticizing the one that came after, and vice versa? And don't find anything, to be honest.
But again, what are you criticizing? Because you can't possibly criticize somebody for taking the opportunities that were available to them at the time, because we would have all done exactly the same.
And you don't know what opportunities you're taking at the moment that the next generation won't have either. You can't live life like that, can you? It's just
no, and all the opportunities that you have that the previous generation didn't have. I mean, every moment in time is unique. So.
And everybody I saw when I was younger, that would be considered a baby boomer now. I mean, everybody I saw were really hardworking people, from my parents and the family, but also neighbors. I mean, I was raised in Germany, so those guys don't joke around. But when it comes to work, everybody was working really hard and in really harsher conditions up to this day than what we are used to. It's not. It's just a different mentality. What I saw, and so I don't see anything to criticize in that kind of mentality, and I don't see anything selfish either in working hard because you want to achieve certain things. Very often they do it actually because they have their children and their family in mind. So actually, it's not even selfish what they do very often. Mm-hmm. That's what I saw. So obviously, you should never generalize just from your own surroundings, but that's a perfect counterexample, though, why you should not generalize when you criticize a whole generation. That's a bit. I just find it a bit difficult to say the least.
It's just immature. Maybe whining.
I think a lot of the criticism of the boomers is backlash to the criticism of the millennials as well, because you hear the classic memes like avocado toast, isn't it? All you do is spend your money in Starbucks and avocado toast. Like, you could have all these things that we've had if it wasn't for your, the way you want to live life. And I think there is a bit of trueness to that. But at the same time, if the things that you shot for when you were a boomer coming of age further away from you than they were, then maybe you wouldn't have the same urge to try and attain these things, like the steady job, the house. If you don't have these, if you put them markers too far away, which I think, like I say, they are further away, maybe you don't have the incentive to save that money. And that's why you live a bit more day-to-day life where you go on more holidays and I don't think it's just a bad attitude type of thing. Does that make sense?
I mean,
if the goal is further away, you might think, well, that's not worth it. And it might not be worth it,
Right.
But if you make certain lifestyle choices, I mean, often it's also a lifestyle choice to, this whole cappuccino in a Starbucks coffee while wearing AirPods and doing cool things online. And okay, there's certain things that have changed for us, like the gig economy, and a lot of jobs now are different, and you can do them on the computer. And maybe you're working hard on a computer in a Starbucks, and it seems like you're just wasting your time with friends. And so if there's something maybe that someone from a more traditional background from another, and that might be a baby boomer or maybe not, doesn't see. But rather than being insulted by that, why not own up to your lifestyle and be proud of what you're doing? I mean, if you're working there, be proud of it. Why lash back? I mean, I don't like this whole catfight kind of mentality, because you're not solving anything. And I'm not saying it's easier to be a millennial, or it's easy, or it's that the old generation had to work hard and we don't. I don't know. I just find it's very, very, very superficial way to solve a problem. That's.
Not solving the problem, is it? It's just
right.
It's just
because it's not solving the problem.
Wasting energy hating on that, is there? You're not going to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say,
probably we should have a millennial on at some point and maybe repeat this.
Well, we are. We're three millennials.
As a second episode. Somebody who actually really has a super anti-baby boomer position, and maybe get the baby boomer on too. But then probably it's going to become a bit messy.
We'll keep them in separate rooms so they don't start fighting.
Do it like the next presidential debate, like mute the microphone when the other one is talking, But yeah, then again, I mean, okay, besides now the point that I don't think that these kind of backlashes work, it's just too big of a group that you're complaining against. And then also, I don't think that the reasons for which you complain, the reasons may be valid. I just don't think that finding a target to kind of to kind of let go of the frustration is very useful, because it just feels like you're looking for scapegoats, as you said in the beginning, James, I believe. And so now it's the baby boomers, but before it was religion.
It also, maybe just to wrap this up, it also stinks to me like another game in identity politics, tennis, because you know, how wide a group do you want? You're not talking about specific sex. You're not talking about specific race, ethnicity. How about everybody that's born in this 20-year period? Boom, you're bad. Come on. So it's kind of another symptom of the mass identity politics that a lot of people enjoy playing, because it's so easy, but it's so simple that it has no meaning or no depth to it whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right. But again, I think it's just a very loud minority complaining loudly about some concepts that they don't really understand. We don't even know how old they are. We don't know who they are exactly. I mean, it's not that there's some political group that has emerged and has created a manifesto of explaining why exactly they don't like baby boomers and how baby boomers managed to destroy the planet for all of us, you know? So, I mean, it's basically like, it's very thoughtless. It's like complaining that the military complex is evil and bad and should be abandoned, typing it on the internet, which was created thanks to the military. So, you know, it's these kind of things that just backfire eventually. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And there might be criticisms valid for them against the military and whatever, you know, but
they need to be a bit more detailed than that.
You need more nuance.
More meat.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
But they're all vegetarian.
Right. Should we wrap this one up?
Sure. I think we hit 22 minutes, 27 seconds. I don't know if Joshua, then you want to say something? Want to add something?
Well, millennials, stop hating on your parents. It's not helpful. And boomers, you know, think about it. Maybe it is a little bit tough. Maybe it's not as straightforward for your kids. To give them a chance. They haven't got to be where you were at their age. You know, let them stride it out. I'm just being peacekeeper here.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay, we be the three-headed Hydra.
Yeah.
Looking for a boomer to enter the Hydra's hull for the next opportunity.